After taking a week off to go watch a Yankee game, Wheels is back with another video going over the new D1 Baseball Top 25, and this week we have a new number 1 team. Before getting to the game I'll show in the background, which was a really good one, I'm going to show some videos I took last week at the Yankees vs Marlins game and the Rangers vs Islanders game. Okay, now the rankings. The Florida Gators stay in at number 25 after picking up some really quality losses while keeping the season record over 500 in the process. Okay, I'm just kidding here. The Gators were one of 4 teams to drop out of the rankings. Dallas Baptist is actually at 25, dropping 10 spots after losing 2 consecutive series. Georgia finally enters the rankings as they come in at 24. I know a lot of you have been commenting saying that Georgia should be ranked, and now they are. Virginia Tech has come back down to earth a little after their hot start, as they're just 1-5 in their last 6 conference games. Still, they stay in the rankings at 23. Entering the rankings at 22 is West Virginia, who has won 7 consecutive conference games after starting Big 12 play 4-4. They have a big road test this week against Texas Tech, who can probably put themselves into the top 25 for next week, considering they also have a 2-game midweek series at Arkansas. Arizona enters the rankings at 21 after a perfect 4-0 week, which now gives the Pac-12 3 teams that are ranked. Re-entering the rankings at 20 is South Carolina, who just won a series in Gainesville, which isn't something we've seen happen by anybody very often the past few years. This reminds me to tell you that in addition to Florida, UCF, Mississippi State, and Nebraska all dropped out of the rankings this week. Coastal Carolina moves up 1 spot to 19 after a 2-2 week that included a road series win over Georgia Southern. Alabama was hanging on by a thread after last week, as they had been the final team in the top 25, but a series win over previously top-ranked Arkansas moves them up to number 18. UC Irvine drops to 17 after losing a series to UC San Diego. They showed a lot of fight in the rubber match, which included a 4 spot in the 9th inning to take the lead, but just couldn't close it out. They'll look to get back on track against San Diego State next weekend. Oregon moves into the all-important top 16. They went 3-2 last week, which included a series win over USC that puts their conference record at 10-5. Another really good weekend for Oklahoma State moves them up to number 15, and they'll look to stay hot after sweeping Cincinnati. Louisiana moves up to 14 after sweeping Marshall in a 3-game series that featured only 7 total runs scored between the 2 teams. They're sitting at 14-1 in Sun Belt Conference play and have a huge series at Coastal Carolina next weekend. Vanderbilt drops down to number 13 after getting swept by Texas A&M. After winning that series at LSU, I thought they had put their road struggles behind them, but this was not a good weekend for them at all. Texas A&M is an incredible team, but I was expecting a little more out of the Vandy boys, especially considering how at the time it was a top 10 matchup. They're 8-7 in conference play and head back home, where they're 6-0 in SEC games, where they'll play a couple of series against teams that just dropped from the rankings. This could be an opportunity for them to get back on track. Wake Forest has finally gotten their ACC record to 500, which moves them up to 12. They host Florida State next weekend in a series that I'm really looking forward to. North Carolina moves back up a couple spots after sweeping Notre Dame. They have a big week coming up as they host Coastal Carolina in a top 20 midweek matchup before going on the road to face a tough NC State team. Before going through the top 10, it's time for some predictions. Didn't make any last week since there was no video, but here are my results from 2 weeks ago. Not great as I only went 7-6, which puts my season record at 25-17. This week, I have Texas A&M over Alabama, Vanderbilt over Florida, Clemson over Pittsburgh, Wake Forest over Florida State, Tennessee over Kentucky in what you'll soon see is a top 5 matchup, South Carolina over Arkansas, Duke over Virginia Tech, Michigan over Ohio State, Texas over TCU, Coastal Carolina over Louisiana, and Oregon State over California. Okay, now the top 10. Virginia re-enters the top 10 after taking back-to-back series. They won 2 of 3 against North Carolina a couple weeks ago, and took 2 against Louisville this past weekend. They have a pretty favorable schedule to end the season, which includes 3 out of 4 conference series remaining being at home, so expect the Hoos to be a mainstay in the top 10 the rest of the way. East Carolina stays at 9 after a 4-1 week, though I'm sure they're mad it wasn't 5-0 after letting a late lead slip away on Sunday. Still, another great week for the Pirates, which I guess is a sentence that's relevant in the context of MLB as well. ECU is 8-4 in conference play and are looking to continue to bolster their hosting resume as we head towards the final few weeks of the regular season. Entering the top 8 is Florida State, who has swept away their in-state rivals this season. 3-0 against both Miami and Florida. That's not easy to do. It's really been a special season for the Seminoles so far, but they have their toughest test of the season coming up as they head to Winston-Salem to face a red-hot Wake Forest team. They'll be on the road to face Duke next week as well, so this is a great opportunity for the Seminoles to pick up their first series win over a team currently ranked in the top 25. Speaking of Duke, they stay at 7 after a 2-2 week that included a road series win at Pittsburgh. They let a late lead slip away when going for the sweep on Sunday, but winning series is the name of the game. Clemson drops down to number 6 after losing a home series to NC State. This is their first real setback of the season, so it'll be interesting to see how they respond. They do have a pretty favorable schedule to wrap up the regular season, as Wake Forest is their only remaining series against a team currently ranked, so don't be surprised if they enter the ACC tournament as one of the top-seeded teams. By the way, I also want to point out how the ACC currently has half the teams ranked in the top 12. Just goes to show how strong that conference has been this year. Oregon State stays at 5 in the rankings. We're just a couple weeks out from their huge series with Oregon, which has major implications within the Pac-12. They'll host them for 3 games, and then head to Eugene for a non-conference midweek game. Still about 2 weeks away, but never too early to circle that matchup on your calendars. Tennessee stays at 4 after a perfect week that included a sweep of LSU. Before talking about the Vols, I do want to talk a little about LSU. I'm really surprised how far they've fallen. 3 weeks ago, I previewed their 9-game gauntlet that featured series against Arkansas, Vandy, and Tennessee. They entered those series with a 2-4 conference record, and I said they'd be in trouble if they came out of it with only 4 or 5 SEC wins. Well, through half their conference games, they're 3-12. This is starting to look like a lost season for the Tigers, which would be the 3rd straight year an SEC team, who's the defending national champion, outright misses the NCAA tournament. There's still time for them to turn it around, but to have a realistic shot at a tournament bid, they gotta go either 10-5 or 11-4 across their final 5 conference series. Either that, or win the SEC tournament in Hoover. Either way, not impossible, but not easy either. Let's see what they can do. Okay, now Tennessee. If the Vols hadn't already established themselves as a legitimate title contender, I think it's safe to say they've done so now. They're 10-5 in the SEC in a year where there's been a ton of volatility in the conference. Their only series loss was in the conference opener at Alabama, who I remind you just handed Arkansas their first series loss of the season. The Vols have by far their biggest test of the year as they head to Lexington to face Kentucky, who moves all the way up to number 3 in the rankings. Honestly, right now the only team I can say that's been more impressive than Kentucky this season is Kennesaw State, who somehow found a way to win a series against the Wildcats back in early March. Kidding aside, this is just an incredible baseball team. They're 14-1 through 15 SEC games and have swept both Georgia and Alabama, 2 teams currently in the top 25. Like Tennessee, though, this is also their biggest test of the season so far. One team is going to come away with a major resume-boosting series win, but the other won't fall down all that far either. Both teams are very deserving of their spot in the top 5. The schedule for Kentucky definitely does pick up from this point on, as they'll also face South Carolina, Arkansas, Florida, and Vanderbilt, but a 14-1 start has set them up perfectly to enter the NCAA tournament as a top 8 national seed. After losing their first series, Arkansas drops the spot to number 2, as Alabama was able to outpitch them and get enough timely hits to take the series. Nobody expected the Razorbacks to win all their conference series this season, which is why they only dropped 1 spot. This is a big week coming up for them, as they host Texas Tech in a 2-game midweek series before heading to Columbia to face South Carolina for 3. I know it's a little early to preview a series that takes place during the final weekend of the regular season, but as things stand right now, we could be seeing a potential 1 versus 2 matchup, as Texas A&M has taken over the number 1 spot. They're coming off a sweep over Vanderbilt that was about as impressive as sweeps get, as they outscored the Doors 36-6, which included back-to-back shutouts to open up the series. This is a team that nobody wants to face right now. They're 11-4 in conference play and 21-0 in non-conference games. They have some of the most talented players in the country, which makes their lineup nearly impossible to navigate through. And don't even bother trying to pitch around them, because then you'll hear 8,000 people chanting, "Ball 5, ball 5. Shout out to that fan base for packing the house this past weekend. There's nothing better than watching college baseball games that are played in front of sold-out crowds. And with that, we have another week of Top 25 rankings. I hope you all enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, everyone, and we'll see you in the next one.
0-1 pitch from Volchko to Talt. Swings and it's a chopper towards second. Haskins has it, guns it to first in time, and Stanford salvages the finale 11-10.